Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a vast, ancient territory, and before you lies a map unlike any other. This map isn't showing you mountains or rivers. Instead, it is marked with invisible boundaries, high fences, and warning signs that have been standing for thousands of years. In the world of the Bible, these boundaries are known as the forbidden. We often hear the word sin and think of a simple list of don'ts whispered in a quiet room, but the reality is much more complex, much more ancient, and frankly, much more fascinating. We are talking about cosmic transgressions, social collapses, and internal fractures that the ancient texts claim can echo through eternity. Today, we are taking an uncompromising look at the spiritual architecture of the scriptures. We are breaking down every forbidden act described in the Word, from the obvious to the obscure, from the ancient laws of the wilderness to the internal heart checks of the New Testament. We aren't just listing rules, we are explaining the why behind the no. If you've ever wondered what the ancient writers really meant when they called something a transgression, get ready because we are about to explain the entire spectrum of the forbidden. To truly understand what the Bible calls sin, we have to throw out the idea that it's just about being naughty. In the original languages, the most common word for sin actually comes from archery. It means missing the mark. It's the idea that there is a bullseye for human existence, a perfect way to live in harmony with the Creator and others, and anything that veers off that path is a miss. This perspective changes everything. It's not just about breaking a rule. It's about failing to reach your full potential as a being made in the divine image. The very first forbidden act in the story of humanity is the sin of autonomy. In the Garden of Eden, the prohibition wasn't about the fruit itself. It was about the source of knowledge. By eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the first pair was essentially saying, we don't want to rely on your definition of right and wrong. We want to decide for ourselves. This is the root of almost every other forbidden act in the Bible. It's the desire to be the captain of one's own soul, independent of the spiritual laws of the universe. When we talk about forbidden sins, we are always talking about variations of this original desire to step off the path and blaze a trail into the shadows. As we move into the era of the patriarchs, we see the sin of deception taking center stage. Think about Jacob and Esau. Jacob's name literally means supplanter or heel grabber. His early life was defined by the forbidden act of stealing a blessing through trickery. The Bible doesn't shy away from showing that even the heroes struggled with the forbidden. Jacob's deception created a fracture in his family that lasted for decades. This reveals a key biblical theme. Sin is never a solo act. It always leaves a wake behind it, affecting the people we love and the legacy we leave. The forbidden nature of lying isn't just about moral purity. It's about the fact that trust is the glue of civilization, and when you dissolve that glue, everything falls apart. Then we reach the mountain in the wilderness, where the 10 Commandments were given. This is the great list of the forbidden. But if you look closely at the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me, you find the sin of idolatry. Now, in the ancient world, this meant literally bowing down to a statue of gold or wood. But the prophetic writers were quick to point out that an idol is anything that takes the place of the Creator in your heart. It could be wealth, it could be power, it could even be your own reputation. The reason idolatry is so strictly forbidden is that the human heart is described as a factory for idols. We are designed to worship, and if we don't worship the source, we will inevitably worship something that can't love us back. Idolatry is forbidden because it is a spiritual dead end. It promises life but delivers a vacuum. Connected to this is the sin of vain speech, often translated as taking the name of the Lord in vain. In our modern world, we think this just means saying a bad word when we stub our toe. But in the ancient context, it was much more serious. It was about using the divine authority to back up a lie or to manipulate people. It was about weaponizing faith for personal gain. This is forbidden because it degrades the sacred. When you use the highest truth to serve a low motive, you aren't just breaking a rule. You are poisoning the well from which everyone drinks. It is a sin of spiritual malpractice. As the Israelites traveled through the desert, we see the sin of murmuring. This sounds like a small thing, right? Just a bit of complaining about the food or the weather. But the Bible treats it as a major transgression. Why? because murmuring is the opposite of gratitude. It is a refusal to see the provision that is already there. It is a spiritual nearsightedness that only sees the problems and ignores the miracles. The forbidden nature of a complaining heart is that it eventually leads to rebellion. It starts with a whisper and ends with a mutiny. It shows that our internal attitude is just as subject to the mark as our external actions. Let's talk about the sin of injustice. Throughout the books of the prophets, Isaiah, Amos, Micah, there is a constant thunderous warning against grinding the faces of the poor. The forbidden acts here aren't about private behavior. They are about how a society functions, cheating a worker out of their wages, ignoring the needs of the orphan and the widow, and using unfair weights in the marketplace are described as abominations. The Bible places social justice at the heart of its definition of sin. If you are right with the Creator but wrong with your neighbor, the prophets say your religious rituals are meaningless. The forbidden sin here is the hard heart that prioritizes profit over people. Then we have the sin of pride. The book of Proverbs famously says that pride goes before destruction. In the biblical view, pride is the ultimate miss because it creates a delusion. The proud person thinks they are the center of the universe. They think they don't need help, and they think they are better than those around them. This is the sin that turned a celestial guardian into an adversary. It is the most attractive sin because it feels like confidence, but it is actually a spiritual cancer that eats away at the ability to learn and grow. It's forbidden because it makes a person unreachable. If you think you already have all the answers, even the Creator can't teach you anything new. In the New Testament, the definition of the forbidden takes a radical turn with the teachings of the Messiah. He takes the external rules and moves them inside the human heart. He says that the sin of anger is equivalent to the act of physical harm, and the sin of lust is equivalent to the physical act of unfaithfulness. This is a massive shift. Suddenly, the bullseye isn't just about what you do with your hands, it's about what you do with your thoughts. The forbidden is no longer just a fence around your actions. It's a light shining into your private imagination. This reveals the psychological sin, the idea that our internal world is the birthplace of our external reality. If we want to avoid missing the mark in our lives, we have to start by checking the aim of our hearts. We also have to discuss the 7 deadly sins, a concept that, while not explicitly listed as a single group in the Bible, is distilled from various passages like Proverbs 6. This includes things like sloth, envy, and gluttony. Let's look at envy. The Bible describes envy as rottenness to the bones. It is the forbidden act of resenting another person's success. It's a quiet sin, one that no one sees, but it destroys the soul from within. It prevents us from celebrating the good in the world because we are too focused on what we lack. It is forbidden because it turns our focus away from our own journey and traps us in a cycle of comparison and bitterness. Gluttony is another one that gets misunderstood. People think it's just about eating too much at Thanksgiving, but in the biblical sense, gluttony is a sin of excess. It is the inability to say enough. It is the elevation of physical appetite over spiritual discipline. It's forbidden because it makes us slaves to our own bodies. When our desire for more becomes the primary driver of our lives, we lose the ability to fast, to be still, and to find satisfaction in the non-material world. It is the sin of the bottomless pit. Let's move to the sin of unbelief. In the letter to the Hebrews, this is described as a root of bitterness that can spring up and defile many. Unbelief in the Bible isn't just having intellectual doubts about certain facts. It is a forbidden hardening of the heart. It is the refusal to trust in the goodness of the Creator even when evidence is provided. It's the sin of the Israelites who had seen the Red Sea part but still doubted they would be fed in the morning. This is forbidden because trust is the foundation of the relationship between the human and the divine. Without trust, there is no connection, and without connection, there is no life. A particularly heavy topic in the New Testament is the sin against the Spirit, often called the unforgivable sin. This has caused a lot of anxiety for people over the centuries. But when you look at the context, it's about the deliberate, persistent attribution of the work of light to the source of darkness. It's a total reversal of the moral compass. The reason it's described as unforgivable isn't because the Creator's mercy is limited, but because the person has reached a point where they no longer recognize the light when they see it. If you call medicine poison, you will never take the cure. It is the forbidden hardness that shuts the door from the inside. What about the sins of the tongue? The book of James has some of the most intense warnings in the entire Bible about the power of speech. He calls the tongue a fire and a world of iniquity. The forbidden acts here include gossip, slander, and rash vows. Gossip is described as tasty trifles that go down into the innermost parts. It is the sin of rebuilding your own reputation by tearing down someone else's. Slander is the intentional destruction of another person's character with falsehoods. These are forbidden because they destroy community. In the biblical view, a person's name or reputation is their most valuable possession, and to take it away through speech is a form of spiritual theft. Then there is the sin of partiality. James also speaks out against showing favoritism to the wealthy while ignoring the poor. He says that if you treat someone better because of their clothes or their bank account, you have become judges with evil thoughts. This is a forbidden transgression against the equality of all people before the divine. It is the sin of looking at the packaging rather than the person. In a world that is obsessed with status and who you know, the Bible's insistence on the forbidden nature of partiality remains a radical and difficult challenge. Let's look at the sin of self-righteousness. This is the primary transgression of the Pharisees in the Gospels. They did all the right things, they followed all the rules, and they were experts in the law. But their forbidden act was their belief that they didn't need mercy. They were so busy pointing out the mote in their neighbor's eye that they couldn't see the beam in their own. Self-righteousness is forbidden because it is a form of spiritual blindness. It uses the rules as a weapon to judge others rather than a mirror to see oneself. It is the most religious of sins, and according to the Messiah, it is one of the most dangerous. The Bible also talks about sins of omission. Most people think of sin as doing something bad. But James says, "To him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin." This is the transgression of the bypasser. Think about the story of the Good Samaritan. The priest and the Levite didn't attack the man on the road. They just did nothing. Their forbidden act was their indifference. In the biblical economy, we are responsible for the missed opportunities to show love and mercy. The mark we are aiming for isn't just a list of things we avoided. It's a standard of active compassion that we often fail to meet. We must also explore the ritual sins of the Old Testament, the things that made a person unclean. Many of these were about hygiene, or maintaining the distinction between different types of life. While many of these laws were moved aside in the New Testament, they teach us an important principle. The forbidden isn't always about moral evil in a vacuum. Sometimes it's about order. The ancient laws of the Levites were about creating a holy space for the presence to dwell. The lesson for us today is that our environment and our habits matter. If we want to live a life that hits the mark, we have to be intentional about the spaces we inhabit and the rituals we follow. The sin of sorcery and divination is another strictly forbidden category. From the earliest laws in Exodus to the warnings in the book of Revelations, consulting the shadows is off limits. Why? Because it's an attempt to circumvent trust. It's the desire to control the uncontrollable rather than walking in faith. The Bible insists that there are spiritual realms and forces that humans are not meant to dabble in for their own protection. It's like a no trespassing sign on a high-voltage fence. It's forbidden because we don't know the consequences of the doors we are trying to open. Then there is the sin of apathy, often called lukewarmness in the book of Revelation. The message to the church in Laodicea is that they are neither cold nor hot. They are just comfortable. They think they are rich and have need of nothing. It is the sin of the comfort zone. When we lose our passion for the truth and settle for a comfortable, middle-of-the-road existence, we are missing the mark by a mile. The mark is a life of fire and purpose, and anything less is a transgression against our own potential. Let's consider the sin of the shepherd. Throughout the Bible, there are harsh words for leaders who mislead their people. Ezekiel 34 is a long indictment of the shepherds of Israel who fed themselves but let the flock starve. This is the forbidden act of abusing authority. When someone has spiritual or social power, the expectations are higher. If they use that power to exploit the vulnerable, they are committing a sin that the Bible treats with the utmost gravity. It is the sin of the broken trust, and its consequences are described as being some of the most severe. In the New Testament letters, we also see the sin of legalism. This might sound strange, but Paul argues that trying to be saved by following the law is actually a fall from grace. It's the forbidden act of trying to earn what can only be given as a gift. It's a sin of the ego, thinking we can make ourselves good enough for the divine. Paul says that if we go back to the rules as our primary way of connecting with the Spirit, we are missing the whole point of the sacrifice that was made. It's the forbidden act of rebuilding the wall that was meant to be torn down. One of the most profound forbidden acts is the sin of unforgiveness. The Messiah tells a parable about a servant who was forgiven a massive debt, but then turned around and demanded a small amount from someone else. When he refused to show mercy, his own forgiveness was revoked. This is a terrifying warning. The forbidden act of holding a grudge is described as a spiritual poison. If we want to receive mercy, we must give it. To refuse forgiveness is to build a wall around our own hearts that even grace cannot penetrate. It is the sin of the closed loop. Why does the Bible have so many forbidden sins? Is it just to make us feel guilty? Not at all. The ancient perspective is that these rules are actually love letters. If you love your children, you tell them not to play in the street. You tell them not to touch the hot stove. The don'ts of the Bible are intended to keep us from the things that would destroy our happiness and the harmony of our communities. Every forbidden sin is a shortcut that leads to a dead end. Every missed mark is a moment where we settle for less than the best version of ourselves. The overarching story of the Bible is the story of sin and redemption. It's the story of a humanity that constantly misses the mark, and a creator who keeps resetting the target. The forbidden acts serve as the darkness that makes the light visible. They show us the gravity of our choices and the depth of our need for a solution. When the New Testament speaks of grace, it is speaking in the context of these thousands of years of missing the mark. The beauty of the message isn't that the rules disappeared, but that the penalty was covered. This leads to the final, most important forbidden sin mentioned in the scriptures: the sin of rejecting the light. In the Gospel of John, it says that this is the judgment, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light. The ultimate miss is to see the truth and walk away from it, to see the path of restoration and choose to stay in the shadows of the forbidden. This is the sin of the final choice. Everything else, all the mistakes, all the debris of our lives, can be addressed. But the refusal to turn toward the light is the one transgression that leaves a person in the dark. When we explain every forbidden sin in the Bible, we see a consistent vision of a life lived fully. The laws against envy, pride, greed, and deception are all designed to create a person who is free from the slavery of their own appetites and free to love others without hidden motives. The forbidden is just a map of the traps that lie along the way. If we understand the traps, we have a better chance of finishing the journey. So, as we look at this map of the ancient and modern forbidden, let's not see it as a burden. Let's see it as a guide. It tells us that our lives have meaning, that our choices matter, and that there is a mark worth aiming for. It tells us that while the shadows are many, the light is stronger. The forbidden sins are the chapters of our past, but the restoration is the story of our future. We are all mark missers in one way or another, but we are also all invited back to the bullseye. Stay focused on the light. Keep aiming for the high mark, and remember that the fences are there only to guide you to the open fields of the divine presence. The ancient warnings remain, but the pathway to the light is always open. Thank you for joining me on this deep exploration of the spiritual geography of the soul. The map is in your hands. Choose your path with wisdom and courage.